Hi, my name is Taylor. I just want to get started because I feel like there's not a lot of opportunities to see or listen to things about me and YouTube or anywhere else. So I just thought I would start this just so I can more do it for my own studying, but in case it helps anyone else. So the materials that I used, I'm 16 days out from taking the test. I used the PLI binder. I found it used, and you can find it used really easily if you read it, or really I got mine from eBay. It's in great condition. So, and I'll probably, if I pass, I'll sell mine. So put that in mind. For the MPEP, I've read 2100 and 700 plus most of 1200 and 2200, and then obviously skip a lot of the rest. I also generated timelines, which was really helpful because there's so many things that can happen in the process of getting a patent, and so it's also really helpful. I couldn't really find any video resources, so that's kind of what my purpose is here. It's not at all to be an all-encompassing resource, so please don't use this as your only way of studying because it is not at all in depth. It's really just covering the basics because that's where we're at here. So first things first, the confidentiality of a patent application is under the USC 122. And so that confidentiality is maintained until the publication, which takes place after 18 months from the effective filing date. And so if you've been studying it all, you'll see what the effective filing date is, how that comes up all the time. But basically, that effective filing date is really important when deciding publication. So that's why things like claiming priority, there's such strict deadlines on that to control publication, that sort of thing. But which ones can always be accessed, and kind of based on from what I've read in the PLI binder and other things, this is a very hot topic for the PTO. They want you to know easily which ones can always be accessed. So the main one obviously is issued US patents or published US applications. Those hands down will always be able to be accessed. Reissue and reexamination, both of those occur after the publication of the patent. And so both of those are going to be available to the public, and they're announced. Those are the ones that get announced in the official gazette. And so people have a chance to pull up prior art and that sort of thing as a result of it. Also in decided or terminated interference. So decided meaning where priority has been determined, and then terminated, obviously, where it's been completed. But that is in the case of when there is a unpublished application which is not issued when it's pitted against an issued application. So basically that interference file is only going to be available if one of the two documents has been published at some point. So it could be a reissue, could be something like that. So the express abandonment, this is included and is important because what will sometimes happen is corporations will want to do an express abandonment to avoid publication. So later talk about the express abandonment, which can just occur at different times for different reasons, and that's in the MPEP 711. That's actually the entire section of abandonment. But for express abandonment, it has to be done at least 4 weeks from publication. Otherwise, the express abandonment does not take effect. If it's once it's out there, it's out there. They can't take it back. But those 4 weeks are critical because the motion and how slow things can go. If it's not done 4 weeks out, then there's no stopping that publication. So kind of self-explanatory, but a good kind of number to remember, 4 weeks. Now the non-publication request is a really interesting one. And so this one has to be made at filing. If it's not made at filing, then you're out of luck. That's it. It just has to be made at filing. You can rescind it at any time. The other times that it might be rescinded is after filing in a foreign country. It's very, very important that when making the non-publication request that you are certifying that you are not going to be filing in a foreign country. So if you go back on that and do file in a foreign country, then you're going to have to do a retroactive rescinding within 45 days of filing in the other country, or the application goes abandoned. And so they just do not look very kindly upon that, because in foreign countries, they're not going to respect the same non-publication request. They're generally going to publish a lot faster even. Filing this, basically you just make a request that's going to include this, the application has not been filed in another country. So, and they're pretty much always going to grant it. But yeah. So then access the patent application. So this is rule 1.14. And so I would encourage reading this if you have reading that rule if you haven't already, just because it has a lot of really good information and sets forth scenarios in a very easy format, so that if you are asked that question on a test, it's pretty easy to look it up if you know where to find it. So general rule that MPEP 100 is access. And so just remembering that 1.14 is specifically that access, I think is really helpful. And so you have the published abandoned application. And so in order to access that one, so it's published, right? That's our first keyword. You just need a copy. You can get a copy as filed upon a request and a fee. For published pending applications, you can get a copy as filed upon request and fee. But the redacted, so that's something that definitely could be an area for questions. In that the redacted remains limited as redacted. They won't go back and give you information that the patent applicant specifically asked to see redacted under, unless it's like really, really special circumstances, I think. So the unpublished abandoned, which is identified in some sort of issued or published application, or if it's relied upon in any way, you can get a copy as filed upon request and fee. The unpublished pending application whose benefit is claimed, that one, as you can imagine, is copy as filed upon request and fee. The unpublished pending application is when it's incorporated by reference, and that's an important aspect. Get the copy as filed upon request and fee. And there's a little caveat to the incorporated by reference we'll come back to. Now for the status of the application, the access can be obtained at any time without a fee, which is awesome. Or it can't necessarily be obtained at any time, but the status of the application can be obtained when it can be obtained, which is a little bit repetitive, but kind of just good to remember. Like when it's published or when it's issued in any way, then you can find out the status of an application easily. So like, for example, if you see it in the official gazette that there's a reissue that has been a reissue that is going before the board or re-examination, then that access can be obtained. You can find out the status of it. So the application the status can also be obtained when it's identified by the serial number and filing date in a published patent document, or the application is open to the public in some way. When the application is in a PCT stage where the US is designated, if it's based on a patent document, the written request is needed and a copy of the file, but not a fee. So that's kind of nice. So who can always access the file? And so this one, I think it's just a good one to sort of remember the details. So there's the inventor. So even the non-signing, I was supposed to say signing, not signing. Sorry, the text was small when I was writing it. Or even after a signing. So the inventor is always going to be able to access unless they've been specifically blocked by the assignee. So, and that can happen, right? Like the assignee and the inventor can have some sort of falling out. And if the assignee has full interest, then they can block the inventor, which kind of crazy. So that's one of them. The assignee of full and partial interest, the licensee of full but not of partial license. And I think that's a really important distinction that can definitely be exploited on a question. So just remembering that assignee of partial interest, they have the power to inspect, but they don't participate in the prosecution. And if you have any more questions about that, definitely look into your MPEP 100. And I'm blanking on where else to look, but it says in MPEP 100 where else they talk about assignees. The attorney or agent and any person given written authorization from the attorney or agent or from others, they can be given authorization from anyone. The timeline for that, there's unlimited access when it's authorized by any of those ones above. But if the PTO or the director is the one who is giving access, like under special circumstances, which we'll see in a moment, that can be limited in time. So special circumstances, like I was just saying, that is when it's an unpublished and pending application, but the owner is interfering with a competitor using this patent. They're more or less enforcing this patent, saying that the other person is infringing. So in that case, you need a petition and fee to the director. And so in those cases, there's a lot of times a limited timeline for it, or a limited amount of time that they can inspect. And so that one has to be served upon the applicant, or a copy can be served to the PTO. Like you can send an extra copy to the PTO for them to serve. But the important thing there is that they have to be served so that they can in some way limit the viewing of it. So then they can raise objections or whatever in response to that petition. The director gives them the space to do that. So then in the non-special circumstances, kind of to reiterate those other ones, only a request and fee for access is required. And so not status, access is required when the patent is relied upon for priority or is incorporated in its entirety. So specifying there, because if it's only incorporated in part, only in part is available. So kind of good to remember. And the assignee, again, can prevent the inventor from viewing and accessing the application, not the licensee, only the assignee. And then which applications are never published? And this one, I think, is a great area for questions, kind of talking about like if non-publication request is filed or not. Provisional, never published. Sign, never published under a secrecy order. And so a secrecy order, there's some information in the MPEP. I think that's more of a lookup area, honestly. Like if they're asking specifics about secrecy order, besides how long does it remain in effect? So it remains in effect 1 year from the date of issuance. And so it's usually put into place by the government in some way because of national security. And so then it can be extended up to 1 year depending on that government agency. So then foreign filing licenses, this one also really good one to kind of keep in the back of your mind, just these bullet points here, how to obtain of them. It's 6 months after filing, they get granted automatically, which is great. But if you don't want to wait that long, sometimes it's granted on the filing receipt. And this is all assuming that it hasn't been flagged for any sort of national security or needed to be under secrecy in any way, or granted through petition. And it did say in the MPEP that a petition is generally granted quickly, like within 3 days, if there's no issue flagged there. And then it can be obtained retroactively, but if it's not obtained retroactively, then the patent's considered abandoned. So definitely a lot of good faith in this area. So that retroactive petition requires a fee, and there has to be a statement saying that it was through unintentional error. And there's a little bit more information as to what that statement contains, but that's in the chapter. I would just go to if you're interested in reading more about that. But if the invention is made in another country, even if it's by an American, then license is spelled wrong there, my bad. No filing license is required. So it's kind of nice there. So DOE and NASA, this section, I think that the PLI said that it's barely been questioned before. Or it says that in a couple other places too, but barely been questioned. But basically, if they do, it must be filed in a non-extendable 30 days from the request. And the statement must set forth the facts surrounding the making of the invention, whether the invention was conceived in a government contract. And then hopefully it won't come up. So basically just some questions here. Is there a fee for obtaining status? Nope. And then pretty much any other questions would be just within there. So yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out or anything, but hopefully this was helpful. Thanks.